All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Warnken, and I'm a Premier Field Engineer with Microsoft, dealing with Configuration Manager. And this is a user group meeting that is being run out of the Charlotte office. The PFEs there have a user group that's fairly active, and we're calling it a subchapter in Tampa. We're presenting on some meetings, but we're also joining locally here and remotely as well. We invite anyone who wants to attend in the local area, either in Tampa or in Charlotte, to come and join us when we have these meetings, or you're always welcome to join us remotely as well. And tonight, I want to talk a little bit about endpoint protection, and if we have time towards the end, we'll look at Defender ATP and onboarding with SCCM as well. And we'll go ahead and get started. I have a very extensive 8 slides in my slide deck. A lot of what we talk about is going to be demo, so we'll just dive right in here. So endpoint protection with Configuration Manager is really about extending the management capabilities of endpoints with ConfigMan. All of the technologies that we are looking at, or the components of endpoint protection, are available on your endpoints and can be managed outside of SCCM through other technologies, whether it be Intune or group policy, or even with just PowerShell scripts to do the management. The power when using these other management systems like Configuration Manager and Intune is extending that and giving you a central place to see the config, manage what's deployed to your endpoints, and how you push those configurations out. The components of things that we manage, we're going to start with the anti-malware, and that's kind of the big heavy hitter. A lot of folks want to turn that on. That's the quick win for them, and we're going to walk through setting that up and how we configure the anti-malware policies. You're also able to configure the Defender firewall policies. A lot of folks are already managing your Windows firewall through group policy, but if you're moving into a broader space and you need a little more granular control, you can extend that management with Configuration Manager as well. We also have the Defender ATP policies. These are the onboarding and offboarding policies that we use with Defender ATP. And then the Defender Exploit Guard. So this is an OS feature that is built around whitelisting applications that are running on your systems. And we can manage those policies within Configuration Manager. And then the same thing with Application Guard. Application Guard is protecting your users and your devices when you're browsing to untrusted websites. You can configure who's trusted, and then when you're visiting untrusted websites, you can virtualize the browser experience on those untrusted endpoints or websites in order to protect your systems if your users accidentally or intentionally download content that is going to negatively impact your environment. There are a couple of links. You download the slide deck. I'll make the slide deck available after the meeting as well. I'll put it up on GitHub. But in the notes, I've got links to all the various documentation sites for each of these features to give a lot more depth and detail on how you can configure them and all of the various things, especially for the Exploit Guard and Application Guard. Those are prerequisites around the version of Windows 10 that you're running, as well as any other prerequisites that are responsible for making those policies function correctly. Right. So in a few minutes, we're going to jump into my lab, but for the sake of time, what I did is recorded the initial setup. So when we're turning on managing the endpoint protection, or adding that endpoint protection role to one of our site servers within Configuration Manager, we're going to go in and add that system role to one of our site systems. In my lab, I went ahead and put it on my primary site. When you initially turn it on, it's going to warn you that you also need to be managing software updates so that you can deploy the definition policies for the anti-malware. We're going to go ahead and configure that. If you're using Windows 10 and the newer server OSs, there's really no need to select anything other than the basic membership. If your endpoints are running something other than Windows 10, and you want to utilize the old advanced membership for the cloud protection, you can certainly enable that. But starting with Windows 10, all of the features and functionalities based on the cloud protection are available in the basic membership. So once we have that configured, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next part of setting up this. And the configuration here is we're going to go in and we're going to set up the anti-malware policies. So when we enable endpoint protection, we've got to define the policies. This is something that you have to do regardless of what type of antivirus product that you're using. For us, there are predefined policies that are specific for Windows. There's also a policy that's predefined for your configuration management server. So when you go into your server in your configuration manager install directory, there is a tools directory that has these default policies that you're able to import in. Just turning on the role gives you your default endpoint or your default client policies. You can also import these. The first one I always import is the configuration manager because we want to apply that to our configuration manager servers. And I'm just walking through here. In just a moment, we're going to pull up the exclusions. What you'll note here is you look through these exclusions. These are already set up to target the install locations of all of our configuration manager files. So all of those blog posts out there around the antivirus exclusions that you need to set up for configuration manager and for Windows are preset in our policies that we import. So you can import these and use them as a base to get your environment up and running. In addition to the configuration manager server policy, we've got a high security policy, a default workstation, and then a performance optimized policy. For the bulk of your systems, that standard desktop policy is going to be applicable. That has all of the basic Windows exclusions already set up, ready to go. Same thing with the high security, everything is set. It's just a little tighter settings for systems that you need to be a little more careful about what you're opening up and excluding from the antivirus scans. And then the last one is the performance optimized. So this is systems that you are accepting the risk and allowing those systems to get a little more performance out of them by excluding a little more. So you want to always test those configurations to make sure that they apply correctly within your environment and they give you the performance that you expect, and you're not going to get anything unusual coming up when you apply them to systems. So once we've got those policies set up, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a client policy or client setting policy to turn on the management of the endpoint protection. By default, our default client policy has the management of the endpoint protection turned off. So we're going to create this policy to turn on the management of this so that we can pilot the implementation. So you can target this to machines that you're ready to test with, and as you onboard this across your environment, you can deploy this out. I always like to have a separate policy when we initially configure the environment so that you can control the amount of systems that you're turning this on, and then once you're comfortable with all of the settings and how they're being deployed, you can then go ahead and add it into your default client policies once you're ready to turn it on for everything. So once we've created that policy, we're going to go ahead and deploy it. In my lab, I'm just going to go ahead and deploy it to all desktops and server clients and push that out. If you're not used to working with the client settings or the policy settings for the anti-malware, what you'll notice is we have a similar priority system for our anti-malware settings that we have with the client settings. So this is important to note because you don't have to deploy the default anti-malware policy. It's going to automatically apply to any clients that you're enabling management of the endpoint protection or the Windows Defender policies through Configuration Manager. Then when we deploy any of the other policies, the priority of that is going to set what takes precedence. And the way that they're created by default is as soon as you import the first policy, it gets a priority of 1, and then the next one is 2 and 3, and so on and so forth, till we get to the big number that's assigned to our default policy. Obviously, the higher the priority, the greater the precedence on there. And let me stop or go back here just a little bit in the demo here. I don't want to have you guys miss what we were showing there. So once we push those out, we want to determine what policy is being applied to the system. All right. So what I'm showing here in our policies here is we can define in the policy where the didn't quite go back there. Well, we'll catch up. I'll show you here in the lab here in a moment if you missed it. What we're showing here is you've got multiple locations that you can target for your clients to download their definitions and the engine updates for it. By default, we're going to utilize the distribution points within Configuration Manager, and we can allow your clients to fall back. We can fall back to a WSUS server within your environment. We can fall back to the Microsoft Security Center. And if you've got it defined and populated, you can also fall back to a UNC file share that you can set up. We'll go ahead and move on, and I'll show you that when we switch over into the lab here in just a few minutes. But that's important to note as we go ahead and take a look at where our clients are receiving policy. We want to understand how they fall back and when they fall back. So we want to make sure that you're getting your content out and distributed so that your clients are able to download those definitions from a location that you're setting the priority correctly, you're getting it from your distribution points, and that you're allowing that fallback to occur. If you don't have a WSUS and you don't want to allow your clients to fall back to the cloud sources like the Microsoft Security Center, then you can remove that from the policy. But always make sure that your clients have multiple locations they can get it, especially with the definitions. Definitions change very frequently. Somewhere between 6 and 8 is about an average for definition updates on a daily basis. So when you go through and you're configuring the syncing for the definitions, you want to make sure that you're syncing multiple times throughout the day to be able to make sure you're getting the most current definitions and deploying them out to your clients. All right. So once you've got your clients deployed, you got them configured out there, you're going to want to test, make sure that you're actually have the protection that you think you are. And in here in the slide deck, what I've given you is a couple of links to locations that you can use to test your configuration. The first one is a test potentially unwanted program that you can go out and download. So if you go to this link, there's a download link on it, and we'll test this here in just a few minutes. That we are looking at when you go and download, if the protection is defined and configured correctly, it's going to block the download. It's not going to let that download succeed. There's also a link here for the smart screen protection or the cloud protection. So we go and we attempt to do another download here. Based on the smart screen protection, it's going to identify that you're able to connect in and block the download for that. And then the last one here is creating a test virus. This is a way to test your antivirus configuration. This is not specific to Windows Defender. You can utilize this with any major antivirus product. You can take this text that's in the slide and you can put this text into a text file, and then you just need to change that text file into some sort of executable extension. For example, just rename the text file to a batch file, and then the engine will detect that you have what looks like, or for test purposes, is a virus. This is a good way to test without actually putting something that is malicious into your environment to make sure that your systems are configured correctly and you're picking up viruses based on the definitions that are installed onto your systems. I have here on the slide a couple of SQL queries that used to be very useful, but as Configuration Manager has evolved, we've integrated all of these into the dashboards and reports. They're available in the system, but I still put them out here. So if you're working on any type of custom reporting around this, these are still useful to know. These are ways that you can go in and just query your environment to see anything that's already been identified as an at-risk system, or has a antivirus signature that's older than a set period of time. When you go in and do the signature definitions, start with anything that's a day older, going up to a 7-day period. So when you go and look at that view, you're going to see the columns for each of those signature dates that you can use to query on. I just put one up here for an example, but it's very quick and easy to identify that in your SQL queries. And then the next topic, like anything with SCCM, there's always logs around this. So I've gone ahead and put the various locations that we've got logs that are important for us. So the first set are the endpoint protection logs that exist on our site server. The EP control manager, this is about the synchronization of the threat information between our configuration server, or the role of the endpoint protection role into the configuration manager database. Next is the EP manager. This is about the state of the endpoint protection role. And then the EP setup is when we install endpoint protection onto the site system. This is tracking the installation of that. The next logs are all logs that exist on your client endpoints. The first one being the endpoint protection agent log that exists in our client log directory. And this is the details or the information that's being sent back and forth between SCCM and that client about the policy. The other logs here are all logs that are actually from Windows Defender. And these are different logs detailing the information about the agent that's occurring, or the activity that the agent is tracking on the client side. The first one is the MP log. This is where we're going to look for definition syncs. If we're having any problem downloading definitions or installing engine updates or things like that, we're going to see this in that MP log. There's an XX there because there's a timestamp associated with that, so the actual name is going to vary on your system. The other log is the MP detection. So these are any detections that are occurring on a system. They're going to be recorded here. And then the last is the network inspection system. All of these, you're looking to troubleshoot a case of either something not picking up something that should be detected, or if you're not getting your definitions synced down. These are all the logs that we're going to go and look at. The next item here, and our last slide that before we dig into the lab here, is the command line here. So on the system where Windows Defender is installed, in program files, the Windows Defender directory is the MP control, or the MP command run executable. So this is the command line way to interact with Windows Defender on your endpoints. From here, you can trigger a scan, you can trigger an update of your definitions, you can actually revert back to the default state or a previous state of a definition, and also you can have the engine revert back to a previous version as well. So if you need to troubleshoot an issue with a client, you can use this command in order to trigger those events on your clients. I'm going to switch the share over here to the screen for my lab here. So here we're sitting on my primary site for a lab that I've got for this. I'm looking at the MP log, just looking at when my agent here is loading the newest definition files and generate those updates. What I do want to do is come back here and we'll kind of walk through what we showed in the demos. So here in the administration pane, we're going to go into the sites. We're going to take a look at this system. So in here is where we have the endpoint protection role installed. So here you can see the basic information. So when you set up the role, if you decide that you don't want to join the cloud protection service, or you want to change the membership option that you selected, you can come into this role and set that. The next item is the client settings. So just really quickly, I'll show you the default client settings. So here by default, the management of the endpoint protection is disabled. And what I've done is created a separate policy to enable that. One of the things that kind of demonstrates some of the power that comes with Configuration Manager is if you need to have separate settings, if you have Windows embedded systems, if you have a different protection strategy between your desktops and your servers, and you want to turn this on or off for specific clients, you can certainly change these settings and deploy them to the collections that you want to change how you do manage those systems. But here you can see we're enabling the management of it. We're telling it when we get this policy, we want to install the endpoint protection client on there. So if you're on a system that has Windows Defender, we're going to start to manage that. If you're on a system that does not have Windows Defender, so if you're talking older server OSs, Windows 7 desktops, Windows 8 desktops, if they don't have Windows Defender, we're actually going to install the System Center Endpoint Protection agent on there and begin to manage them that way. You have the option to turn on or off the ability to restart or to install and restart outside the maintenance window here. And then you have the ability to suppress any restarts that occur when you're installing the client as well. Here, this is one of those important items to note is understanding how you're configuring. So here, the default setting is to disable the ability to use alternate sources like Windows Update or the cloud services to download the engine and any initial definition files. So this is forcing us to use our Configuration Manager infrastructure to make sure that we're properly deploying a vetted or installation of the agent. Next item to look at here is the actual policies. So here, we'll take a look at the standard policy first. So here, this is, as we were talking earlier, you have the ability to set multiple sources here. So here, our initial or highest priority source is our Configuration Manager infrastructure. So we're going to attempt to use our distribution points first to download the agent and definition updates and any engine updates that go along with this. If you need to change the priority of that, you can move a particular item up or down in the priority and just simply unchecking it. If you don't have WSUS in your environment, you don't have to utilize that. And then here, as you drill through the settings, you can set when they're going to check in daily to make sure that they've got the latest. So if they haven't received anything from Configuration Manager telling it that we have a new definition out there, we're going to enforce a specific check-in at least once a day to make sure that we're getting the latest information and protecting our environment. You also have the ability to configure when and how we scan the systems. So here, the default settings here, we're going to run a quick scan once a week. You can enable it. You can change it from a quick scan to a full scan and configure the settings associated with that. Along with that, you can set the scan settings. You can set whether or not to scan email and email attachments, if you want to include or exclude your USB drives, if you want to scan network files or not. You can configure all of that. Kind of the common one here is, if you have users who are complaining about performance, you have the ability to set up a policy here that can allow your users to manage or configure the CPU that's dedicated to the scans, and you can also control how much you're going to allow your users to manage the scans as well. You can set the default actions. We have 4 priorities of actions. So we can set how we're going to react to something that occurs. So we can set a recommended, meaning we're going to take the recommended step when we get a severe action. We can set remove, or we can set quarantine specifically. So if we're not going to take the recommended action, if the recommended action is to quarantine something, but you want to immediately remove it, you can change that or leave it at recommended based on the actions that you want. You can configure the items here for the real-time protection, turning it on or off, monitoring that, setting the whether or not you're going to scan the incoming and outcoming, or just the incoming or just the outcoming here. And then the biggest one that with any antivirus is defining the exclusions that are here. So as I said, we've got all of the default exclusions that are published out there for the Windows environment. So everything that's critical to allow Windows to perform that we recommend that you exclude from the scans, we can go ahead and have those defined. If you have line of business apps or anything like that that need a specific exclusion, if they've got a specific file type in a directory that needs to be excluded to not impact performance, you certainly can add those. Just take that as a something you always need to test. You always need to evaluate the risk. Anything that you don't exclude, you need to ensure that you're not vulnerable to anything coming in and potentially impacting your environment because you're excluding that. And then the last item I want to talk about here is the Cloud Protection Service. So this is allowing Windows Defender to connect back into the Microsoft Security Service and get definition updates, to get information sent back to determine the action you take. This is one of those great wins where you hear the stories around one person in the world getting infected with a virus. We detect that, and while that one or maybe two or three other users get infected, we're able to block the majority of the world from being impacted or getting infected with malicious files that are out there. By allowing the machines to talk to our Cloud Protection Service, we pass that information up. We then update real-time protection that can be sent back down to your clients around whether or not this is a malicious activity and there needs to be action taken.
Hey, John, can we interrupt you for 1 second?
Absolutely.
We have a question from Brian Bishop about reporting. I know you are not seeing the text in the chat room. If you want to make it interactive, we can hand it right now. If you want to wait until the end, we can wait until the end. Just let you know.
No, we certainly can take a look at that question.
Hey, John, it's Matt. It was Harjeet. He was asking about the best mechanism to get status compliance definition versions of multiple systems. But I think he's maybe the reports are missing from the console. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
we got those 6 in the console, but it sounds like his may be missing. But also, any tips or recommendations you have on reporting for Endpoint?
Yeah, so there are built-in reports, and you called it out in the chat there. There's 6 built-in reports that are out there. The other thing that you have when you look at your console around reporting, and it's one of those things that we were going to get to. We can go ahead and jump to it. So we have a dashboard here under the reporting node for security, specifically for the endpoint protection status. And it gives us a couple of dashboard views into the environment. So this is a kind of a quick, you can target it to a collection that you want to get the information from. It tells you how many systems that are in that collection, how many have endpoint protection enabled and are being managed. If they are at risk, they don't have the SCCM engine or Defender enabled, they're going to show up here as at risk. If they don't have the latest definition update, they're going to highlight or come in here at different items here around this dashboard. Let me come down here. So you get various information around that. You get information here about the installation state. So if you've got failures around installing the agent on the system. And then if you're getting activity in the environment where you are not able to remediate or you're not able to run a scan, or there's a restart required, anything like that, here within the dashboard, you can drill through on those particular items. And it will go out and run a message or run a query against the state messages that are coming in around these particular items. I don't have any in this lab just yet that are reporting in with any sort of remediation failure. But if there is, it's going to give you all of that information around the malwares that was detected, the item that was, or the remediation that was recommended, and when it failed, the machine that it failed on, so that you can drill in and take any additional action that you need to as well. The other item too is you can configure alerts here. So you can set up alerts as well based on things like this where malware is detected. You can trigger an alert. You can have it pop up in your console showing that there's been activity. You can also tie those alerts into reports and have them emailed out. So you can have a daily report showing all of that information being sent to you, being sent to managers, anything that you need as far as reporting at a kind of a triggered based event, you can fire that out. You can also, like we said, we have the built-in reports as well that you can publish. So if you just need to allow anybody who needs to check on compliance, they can report or connect to your reporting services point and run those reports, and they can set up subscriptions to those as well. So if the information being triggered within an alert is a little more granular than they want to see, and they want to see an overall and just get a daily status summary from a report, they can set up those subscriptions as well. Right, so if there's any information that you have that's not in the console, if you need to create any custom reports, you certainly can do that. So you can, the information that's there, what you're showing, looking at the screen here, so you're showing the information there. What I'm seeing in your reporting services point, that's a hidden folder that you're drilling into. But you can certainly either unhide that folder and make it show up in your console, or create custom reports that you're able to, based on those reports, and make them out there as well. And that becomes information that's you're able to share with your security team. So we talked a little bit about the policies. The next item I wanted to go into is the configuration that you need to set up for synchronizing your definition updates and getting those deployed out to your clients. First thing I want to cover here is the changes you're going to have to make to your products and categories if you're not already synchronizing them in order to support the definition updates that you need to deploy to your systems. So here when we come in and we take a look at our software update point, the biggest one here for classifications. Definition updates are what we have to enable. And I'll apologize for my lab. I've got another experiment around some of the bad things that we can do with configuration here. So that's why I've got all of these classifications checked here. But the biggest one here to make sure that we get those definition files is we want to make sure that we're synchronizing the definition updates into here. And then for products. So the easy one to configure, if your environment just has Windows Defender, when we come down here to our Windows products, there is a Windows Defender product that you need to enable to synchronize the definition updates for that. The other item you need to synchronize, if you've got older OSs, is the Forefront Endpoint Protection for 2010. So this was the previous name of the product, but the definitions still are being published under that name. So this will give us both the endpoint protection or the SCCM agent definitions and then the Windows Defender definitions as well. So once you enable them and have your software update point sync, here when you come into your software updates, you're going to see all of these definition updates starting to be populated in here. You'll get them for the Windows Defender, for the endpoint protection, the any agent updates or whatnot. These are all going to come in here and be available for you to deploy out to your endpoints. Because definition updates are being done multiple times during the day, the easiest way to manage this and the best practice around this is setting up an automatic deployment rule in order to download these and push them out to your clients. When you create your automatic deployment rule, there's actually a template that will help you configure that and set that up as far as the selections that you need to make. But really the biggest item here is making sure that you are looking at those products, downloading those. What I always do here is I'll take the template and I'll configure that and give me an initial synchronization to give me a baseline of engine updates as well as definition updates that go into my deployment package. And then I add in the additional filters for I only want to get updates that have come in within the last day, and also set it to not include anything that's been superseded. What that does is each time this runs, it's only going to grab the current version of any definition and engine updates that need to come down. And then what I do, and it depends on your environment on when you run this, I have my software update point synchronizing every 8 hours to make sure that we've got an updated set of definition files. And then each time I do a synchronization, I have this automatic deployment rule run. If you're synchronizing more frequently, or if you need a separate schedule that's not tied to the synchronization, you can define that here for your automatic deployment rule. One thing to note about deployment of your definition updates to your endpoint protection systems. Because Configuration Manager manages both the engine and the definitions, we download updates for both and deploy them to your endpoints. Traditionally, when we think about definition updates, we're thinking about a very small file that's getting downloaded that just has the rules around the detection that we need to put on there. But we have to consider the engine updates, any deltas between different versions that need to be accounted for. And the reason I call that out is there are some space constraints that you need to be aware of, or impacts really around doing this. So I stood this up. I synchronized the initial set of definitions and engine updates yesterday. So there's only about 20 or 30 definition updates and engine updates that exist within my deployment package here. But the content that's being downloaded is a little larger than what you might expect. So here, this is the folder that I have everything being downloaded to. we take a look at this folder, you're going to see it's about 3 gig right now, a little over 3 gig. So this is something that if you're not expecting this or you're not planning for this on your distribution points when you're pushing this out, you do need to be aware that even though you're assuming that I'm just downloading a definition, or if I point to the Security Center or any cloud resources and I just download the definition, I'm getting a very small file. Why is my package so large? The reason is because we also have the engine updates and things that you're not going to get when you point to a cloud site to just get the definition update. So you always want to make sure that you consider that and plan for that. You may also plan for some additional maintenance around the expiration or cleanup of your deployment package to make sure that you keep this at a manageable level. But I've had multiple folks that have called or had me come on site that were surprised around the size of that package when their thinking was it's just definition updates. All right, so we have this out. The other items here that I wanted to show really are, let's go back to our policies. Here we can see I've got 2 different policies that are deployed out. I've got my configuration manager template that was imported. That's deployed to a collection that has just my config man servers in there, so that I can put the right protection policies there. For high security, I have this deployed to a collection for domain controllers. There's nothing in that collection right now, but that's one of those things that I just want to show you. You can push this out to the specific collections that you're managing that. The other thing to note here is the priority. So if a system ends up getting both of these policies applied, if you've got it, the config manager policy applied, it's going to take precedence, and we're going to use the settings there. So if you've got multiple things there, make sure that you're managing that. You may have a security recommendation that says, we want this to always apply, and then you would make that your highest priority policy that you would push out to your systems, and then plan for that and how you deploy the policies to your clients. So what we're going to do now is we're going to test our configuration here. The first one that I want to show here, let's come back here and we'll go to our downloads. So the test file. So I have this test file. Oh, actually showing it right here. I can't open the file because it contains the text that tells us that it's a test virus. So we'll create a new file here. And in just a moment, I'm going to switch back over here and grab that text. All right, so here we'll just put this text in here that identifies this as a test virus on this system. So here it's just a text file. We're able to save it, but as soon as we rename this file to something that is an executable, it's going to get picked up. It tells us, hey, this is a virus. It's telling us that we're not able to successfully save this because it's picked it up as a virus. So however many times we try, it's not going to allow us to save that. And then once it's detected that, when we go up, it's telling us that the file potentially contains a virus. So that's the anti-malware engine working right there. The other configuration here to test, we'll go grab the website for the potentially unwanted program. All right, so here we'll go ahead and trigger the download. Yep, let's save this. And here we go. It's showing us that it's being blocked here because it's a potentially unwanted program. So it's not going to allow us to save that on the system. We'll try it a different way. We'll tell instead of save it, let's run it. Same thing. So that's showing us that it's configured there. And then we'll go ahead and run the check for smart screen here. And the URL there that's in the slide, it's just a short link to a download site with a test file. Here, let's save the file. And it's telling us, in this case, it's telling us it's coming from Defender Smart Screen, but it's blocking the download of that as well. All right. All right, so come back here. So here are in our Defender logs location. So I didn't call this out on the slide, but logs, well, actually I did in the logs location. The Defender logs live in a couple of different directories. So here we have the MP log. We also have the MP detection log here. So we can pull up the detection log to see the activity here around this, showing when it started, any activity that's occurring here on the system. If you're looking to troubleshoot anything, one of the items here, this is the Defender location, and this is where the MP command run is. So on the slide, there is a link to the doc site for that that will tell you all the various activities that you can run with this command. But you can also just do a help to get that information. So if you're not sure, one of the key items here to know are these two options here: get files and the get files tag track. So these are how you can collect the log files if you're troubleshooting. If you come back here to the directory where all of the files here, if you just do a search here for logs, what you're going to see is there's a couple of locations. Some of these exist in the support folder, in the scan. There's a couple of locations, and depending on what you're looking for, you might not remember where all of those logs are at. But you can use the command line to grab all those log files. And if I could type, it would work. And then it's going to go grab all of those files and then prepare them. So this would be a case, if you've got some sort of support case open with us around troubleshooting, you can use this to prepare log files, but you can also use it to grab log files for yourself to review all of the information collected into a single source rather than hunt through the file system to find all of the information associated with that. So what you'll see here, we went ahead and grabbed all those and created this cab file that contains all the log files that you could then extract out to view all the various log files associated with the Defender product. There. So I just want to take a break here for a moment, open it up for any questions if anything's come in, or anybody has any questions they'd like to ask before we jump on to the next section here. All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, we'll go ahead and move right into the next part. So the next part here that I wanted to talk about is onboarding systems with Defender ATP. Let me change the share for a moment. All right, I don't see the window I want, but let's close some of these out so we can. All right. That's not what I want you to see. Here we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pull up the Security Center, which is the portal that we use to manage Defender ATP. So when we log in here, this is kind of the extension. So once we begin to manage Defender, we want to integrate that in with kind of all of the cloud resources that we have available here. So here is the portal that we have around here. It's showing all of the various alerts and activity that's occurred within here. Some of these, as we drill in through here, we're going to see that these are items that are coming from the machines that are in my lab. Others are from it's a demo data that's in here. But here we have this this alert that came in here. So this tells us the activity and gives us all of the information here around that. Here, what this shows us, it gives us the machine that this occurred on, the user that it occurred on, and then it gives us all of this various activity associated with anything that is occurring within the environment. So here it gives us a very rich and detailed information around the malicious activity or the potential malicious activity that's occurring within your environment. It gives you that full set of information that your security team needs to kind of to troubleshoot, to investigate, to determine if it's really something malicious. Is it something that's moving through your environment that you need to take action on? And if they need to escalate this and take any other action. But it's this is kind of that rich threat hunting information that you get based on the activity, showing where it's coming from, where it's originating to, and if it's moving through your environment, how it's moving from machine to machine. So in here, I'm going to show you here. We'll come into the machine list here. So we have some information that's coming in here from the demo environment. So everything here that's either Azure AD joined or no information here around the domain is from the demo, kind of giving us all of that information so we can see information here. But these two machines here are from my lab environment. This CM01, this is my primary site, and then the CM SQL01, this is the database server for my, my lab environment. So these two machines have been onboarded into this environment, and they're reporting information here into the ATP console. So if there was any activity going on, we'd be able to see that information here, get that rich reporting information as well. One of the things that we have as an option here when we have the ability to onboard machines. Onboarding through ATP can be done through scripts that you can deploy. You can deploy it out through group policy, through Intune, but you can also do it through Configuration Manager as well. So when we go into onboard, we'll come down here into the settings and then into machine management, and we can do the onboarding. You also have the ability to do offboarding as well. So if a machine has come in and you no longer want to manage it with ATP, you can offboard it so it will deregister from the environment and stop reporting in. But here we go in through the onboarding process. We select the OS of the machine that we're going to onboard in. So we can starting with Windows 7, 8.1, we can onboard those, Windows 10. The older versions of the server OSs are available as well. 2019 and 1803 for servers. And then you can also manage other OSs, Android, iOS, Mac, Linux machines as well. So in my demo environment, all of my servers are 2019 servers. So that's what I use to generate my onboarding file. If you were just testing this, you can create a local script that will allow you to onboard up to 10 machines into the environment. You can also create a script that you can deploy through group policy, through Configuration Manager, or if you're managing some VDI machines, you can generate the script using that. When we create the policy here for Configuration Manager, it tells us the prerequisites here about how the versions that we're going to support this on, and we can put that in. It gives us links to the documentation here around configuring the information to onboard that. It also gives us a detection test as well. So once that onboarding package is run against the machine, you can run that on the machine, and then it will trigger a message back into the ATP portal to verify that the machine has been onboarded and is being managed. But here, once we answer the questions in the configuration GUI here, we go ahead and tell it to download the package. What this does is it downloads a file here to the system. Let me switch here to just a screen share. All right, so here, once we download the file, this zip file just contains a configuration or command file that needs to get run on the systems that you're onboarding. One thing to note is the file here. Oh, I don't want to. Let's switch over here. I've already got it extracted. So once we download this command file is in here. We can open this up. And this has all of the information. Now, this information inside of this file, you need to consider this sensitive information because this is information around reporting into your ATP environment. So you would want to secure this file, protect it. You don't want it to get out because then you've got other folks reporting in to your environment as well. But this is a script that you just need to run against your endpoints. If you look in the Configuration Manager documentation, in order to use the the Defender ATP policy, the ATP portal needs to configure to deliver you an onboarding file. And it's been a while since I've done this. I know it did used to do that in the past, but that command file, you can't use that. So until that portal starts to regenerate those onboarding files, the way that you would deploy this or onboard your systems is you just take that configuration file and deploy it as either a package or an application. So I went ahead and created a package here that will go ahead and run that command file and deploy that out to my systems. And from there, once that information is in your environment and you begin to onboard, you also have the ability to see the information around the ATP status. So here we see that we've got systems that have the ATP agent deployed out in our environment, and we see if they're healthy, if they're not being managed, if they haven't been onboarded. We get that information here within our ATP dashboard as well. All right, that's the end of my presentation, but if anybody has any questions or anything else they'd like to ask or see, feel free to speak up and we'll dig into it.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Have you heard of like the RMM tools, the remote management tools like LabTech and SolarWinds?
Yes.
Does this, I'm very familiar with those, but does the system management, I was under the impression there's two of them. There's a SCCM and an SCOM, which is like a continuation of there's a Microsoft Operations Manager. Mm-hmm. Does this have all the functionality of those RMMs?
So Configuration Manager and the Operations Manager are two different products within the Systems Center suite. So the functionality that you traditionally are talking about within SolarWinds and those other items really compares to the Operations Manager, which is the kind of the new generation or the cloud version of that is the Operations Manager or the Windows Analytics suite and the management agent that goes along with that when we begin to manage those systems from Azure. But those are kind of the direct correlation. When we talk about SCCM, that's not something you traditionally think about monitoring the environment. SCCM is more the configuration management, saying we're doing software deployments, we're managing Defender or any malware on the system. We're doing compliance. We're checking configuration items within your system, registries, settings, reporting if they're set correctly. If they're not, managing that drift by automatically remediating them or deploying a package to do that remediation for you. Okay.
Also, if you use a package like Defender, because I've always had clients that use like Kaspersky and Norton and McAfee, does that serve the same purpose, or can you use more than one?
Yeah. So Defender is it's part, or one of the components is the anti-malware component. The other components we kind of touched on real briefly, but they kind of line up. And the way that kind of the Microsoft Security Suite or the options that we have, they are built in layers, and we manage them within layers. So Defender is an OS feature that we're utilizing to do anti-malware protection. That's similar to what you would have with the McAfee anti-malware agent or Kaspersky or any of those other things. Now, all of those suites are kind of similar. They've got different functionality, built into their agents, and they manage them in different ways. With Microsoft products, we are focused on enhancing the security features that are built into the OS. So a lot of things that we do come from the Defender agent within the operating system, and we're delivering those definition files to it. When we talk about the other options, the application protection, the exploit guard, things like that, we are building on to the functionality that's already within the Windows 10 OS, and we're extending that OS functionality, bringing in central management to them.
Okay. And SCCM only picks up Windows machines, right? Nothing, no Mac or Linux on the network.
So the official answer right now is SCCM has an agent only for Windows devices right now. If you're using some third-party tools for Macs, like JMF, you're able to manage that. They are not deploying the SCCM agent on. What they do is they put their agent on, and then they hook in, they send custom messages into our database. So we get inventory information, we get status information from your Macs, but we no longer, in the past, we had a client that you could put on your Mac systems and your Unix systems, but that older client has reached end of life. If you're using some of those older clients, you can get those systems into your environment, but the functionality that you're going to get is going to be limited to the functionality that's present for those clients when they were released. Any new features and things that come along with Configuration Manager are not going to be supported, and you always run the risk of those clients, breaking, not being functional as far as managing it with SCCM as we update SCCM.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let me switch back, see if there's any questions here.
Yeah, they have a couple in the chat, John, that just came in.
Okay. All right, so Ben, you've got a question, where do I choose the collections where malware is detected for? You've got redundant alerts. So here, the way that you can choose the collection that's shown in your dashboard. Bring this back up. So here in our dashboard for Endpoint Protection, let's come back here. All right, so here, this is where we can choose the collection that we're targeting for information that comes in. Once you drill in and you look at malware that's coming in, that's being detected, this is simply telling you the collection that a machine exists in. So if a machine exists in multiple collections and we're detecting that, then you're going to see it in multiple locations. So if you have nested collections and you're getting that, that's more a way for you to find that machine. It's giving you that information so that you can go to that collection and find that machine. It's also giving the machine name. So from there, you're not really selecting. You can come in here and modify your view or add a search within here to say, okay, I want to add a specific collection. We don't have anything in here, but we can give it, a specific collection name. If we were searching through to say, I only want to see machines from a specific collection, we can put that collection name in there to limit this down. But if you don't have a search filter in there like that, you're going to see every time a machine is in a collection and generates alert, you're going to see multiple alerts show up in this search because it's managed under multiple collections that the definition updates or the policies are being deployed to. Okay. So Saeed, I didn't come prepared to talk about licensing. I generally talk or do these talks from the perspective as, I'm an engineer. I don't care about cost. I want you to do pick the right things. And then if you have any questions around licensing, you definitely want to talk to your account team. There is licensing that needs to be considered especially with ATP. It's add-on if you don't have an E5 subscription in Azure. for your or Azure AD to manage those things, but you definitely want to talk to your account team to get specific pricing information for that. All right, and then Jared, you wanted to hear more about the firewall management. So with firewall management, here, this is really setting up the configuration of the firewall here. So we can come in here and define a firewall policy and create the rules that you're going to apply to a system here. So here from a basic management, we can say, do we want the firewall to be on or off or not configured? So if we turn it off for the domain, I want to turn it on for private, public, and then define, do we want to block incoming? I'll change that to set, this is similar to how you would do this within group policy. And then we would deploy that out here. So this is managing the policy itself, whether it's on or it's off. And then kind of the way that I typically do this with my clients is if we're going to turn rules on or off, we'll do deployments or compliance items around commands that are actually enabling the NetSH commands, turn specific ports on or off for systems, and deploying that out so that we can manage all of that within Configuration Manager. It's a little different from group policy, where the group policy item, you can go in and you can define the individual ports and deploy that as part of your policy. Here, this is managing the state of the firewall, and then we would use either a software deployment or compliance item to turn the specific rules on or off. All right, so John, same thing with firewall management. All right, if nobody else has any other questions, then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll let everyone in who's local socialize for a little bit longer, and everyone who's remote, they can go grab dinner if they have not grabbed it already. And then we'll go ahead and send out a link to the recording and then to the slide deck when we publish it up on the GitHub site that Matt just put in the chat there.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.